The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the sterile corridors of Chin Technologies, casting sharp shadows over the polished marble floors that reflected the hurried footsteps of employees rushing to meet their late-night deadlines. Maya Rodriguez pushed her mother's cleaning cart down the hallway, the wheels creaking gently against the silence that had settled on the 42nd floor of the skyscraper in downtown Toronto. At 23, she had spent countless nights like this, helping her mother Isabel finish the cleaning rounds that kept their small family afloat. Maya stopped in front of the corner office, where the golden plaque read David Chun, CEO, in elegant script. Through the glass walls, she could see the silhouette of a man bent over his desk, his graying hair catching the light from multiple computer monitors. Even at 9 o'clock at night, David Chin remained at his post, a testament to the relentless determination that had built his tech empire from nothing more than a small electronics repair shop in Chinatown 30 years ago. "Mija, you don't need to stay here with me every night," Isabel murmured in Spanish, her voice heavy with guilt as she emerged from the executive bathroom with a bucket of dirty water. Her hands, marked by decades of hard work, trembled slightly as she wrung out the mop. "You should be studying or out with your friends." Maya smiled at her mother, her dark eyes shining with a quiet determination that closely resembled Isabel's own. "Mom, we're a team. Besides, someone has to make sure you don't work until midnight again." The truth was more complicated than Maya let on. After graduating with a full scholarship in mechanical engineering from the University of Toronto, she had faced month after month of rejections. Despite her excellent grades and enthusiastic recommendations from her professors, the doors remained closed. The excuses were always polite, but the pattern was clear. A young Black woman from humble beginnings simply didn't fit the image that engineering companies had in mind for their employees. Meanwhile, the bills kept piling up. Rent for their small apartment in Scarborough, Isabel's growing medical expenses from the arthritis in her hands due to repetitive work, and Maya's student loan payments accumulated like an unrelenting avalanche. So, when Isabel mentioned that the cleaning company needed extra help on the night shifts, Maya didn't hesitate to offer her assistance. "You know," Maya said as she organized the cleaning supplies on the cart, "some of the things I see in these offices are fascinating. That development department on the 38th floor is working on some kind of revolutionary engine." Isabel stopped cleaning and looked at her daughter with a concerned expression. "Maya, you shouldn't be looking at other people's documents. We could lose our jobs." "I'm not spying, Mom. It's just that, well, they leave everything open, and sometimes I can't help but notice." Maya lowered her voice. "They're trying to develop an electric motor that's completely silent and uses a fraction of the energy of current models. But from the fragments I've seen, they're facing a fundamental problem with energy transfer." Before Isabel could respond, the door to the CEO's office opened with a soft click. David Chin emerged, his impeccable clothes still without a wrinkle despite the long hours. His gaze initially passed over them, as if they were part of the furniture, but then something made him stop. Maybe it was Maya's confident posture, or maybe the intensity in her eyes as she spoke about engineering. "Sorry," he said in English, his voice carrying only a slight accent that betrayed his origins. "I couldn't help but overhear. You said something about energy transfer?" Maya felt her blood rush to her face. Isabel hurried to stand protectively in front of her daughter, but Maya gently pushed her aside. "Mr. Chin, I apologize if we were speaking too loudly." No, Chin interrupted, genuinely intrigued. "You mentioned a fundamental problem with energy transfer. What exactly were you referring to?" Maya hesitated, aware that she was treading on dangerous ground. But something in Chen's look, an intellectual curiosity that she recognized from her own professors, encouraged her to continue. "Well, sir, if I understood correctly from the fragments I casually observed, the problem seems to be in the interface between the rotating magnetic field and the stationary conductors. The energy loss isn't coming from resistance, as most would assume, but from the desynchronization between the harmonic resonance frequencies." Chun was silent for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. Maya began to regret speaking, wondering if she had just sealed both of their fates with her reckless words. "And you came to this conclusion just by looking at fragments?" Chin finally asked. I studied mechanical engineering at university, Maya replied, raising her chin slightly. Energy systems were my specialty. Chun crossed his arms, an unreadable expression on his face. Interesting. My team of 15 engineers, all with PhDs from prestigious universities, has been working on this project for 2 years. And you're telling me you identified the main problem just by looking at fragments while cleaning the offices? Chen's tone was far from hostile, but there was a challenging quality to his words that made Maya straighten up. Sir, I didn't mean to imply that. No, Chen interrupted again, this time with a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I'm genuinely curious. If you're so confident in your diagnosis, how about we put it to the test? Isabel stepped forward, alarm clear in her voice. Mr. Chen, please, my daughter didn't mean to offend. Chen raised a hand to silence her gently. No offense, Mrs. Rodriguez. In fact, I'm impressed. He turned to Maya. Here's my proposal, Miss Rodriguez. Tomorrow is Saturday. The building will be practically empty. If you want, you can come to the lab and take a look at the real motor. If you can identify a viable solution to the problem my team has been facing, I'll personally ensure it's implemented, and you'll receive full credit. Maya felt her heart race. And if I can't? Chun shrugged. Then you'll have lost a Saturday, and I'll have confirmed that experience and formal education are irreplaceable. He paused, his eyes gleaming with something Maya couldn't fully identify. But there's one condition. If you accept this challenge, you must be prepared for the consequences, whatever they may be. What we discover tomorrow could change much more than just this project. Maya looked at her mother, who subtly shook her head. But something in Chen's expression, a mix of challenge and genuine respect, stirred something inside Maya that had remained dormant through months of rejection. I accept, she said, her voice firm and clear. Chen nodded, satisfied. Excellent. Meet me in a laboratory on the 38th floor tomorrow at noon. And, Miss Rodriguez. He paused at the elevator door. Wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty. Real engineering is a messy job. As the elevator doors closed, Maya and Isabel were left alone in the silent hallway, the weight of what had just happened settling slowly upon them. Mija, Isabel whispered, her voice trembling. What did you just do? Maya looked at the spot where Chen had been, a mix of anticipation and terror running through her veins. I don't know, Mom, but I think I just changed our lives. The Chun Technologies building felt different on Saturdays, stripped of the frenetic energy of weekdays and enveloped in an almost reverent stillness. Maya passed through the security desk at 11:45, her footsteps echoing in the vast marble atrium as she made her way to the elevators. She had spent almost the entire night awake, alternating between researching everything she could find about advanced electric motors and questioning her sanity for accepting Chen's challenge. Isabel had spent the morning trying to dissuade her daughter, worried that this confrontation might not only cost them their jobs but also harm Maya's reputation in the Toronto engineering community. What if it's a trap? She had repeatedly asked. What if he's trying to humiliate you publicly? But Maya felt something different. There was something in the way Chun had looked at her the night before, an acknowledgement that went beyond mere curiosity. It was as if he had seen something in her that she herself was just beginning to understand. The elevator doors opened on the 38th floor, revealing a glass-lined corridor that offered a panoramic view of Toronto. The CN Tower rose majestically against the blue autumn sky, and Maya could see Lake Ontario shimmering in the distance. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to work here every day, to be part of a team pushing the boundaries of technology. On time. I like that, came Chen's voice from behind her. Maya turned to find him emerging from a door marked Advanced Development Lab. He was dressed casually today, in dark jeans and a light blue button-up shirt, but his presence still commanded respect. Mr. Chun, Maya said, extending her hand. Thank you for the opportunity. David, please. And the pleasure is mine. He shook her hand firmly, then gestured toward the door. Ready to see what's been keeping my team up at night? The lab was impressive, a cathedral of cutting-edge technology with meticulously organized workstations, testing equipment Maya had only dreamed of using, and multiple screens displaying complex data. But the center of it all was the motor itself, a masterpiece of precision engineering the size of a microwave, mounted on a test platform surrounded by sensors and cables. This is the Aurora project, Chen explained as they approached the motor. 3 years of development, $2 million invested, and 15 of the brightest minds in Canada working on it. The goal is to create an electric motor that's 90% more efficient than anything on the current market, completely silent and small enough to be used in everything from cars to drones. Maya circled the platform slowly, her trained eyes absorbing every detail. The design was sleek, almost artistic in its apparent simplicity, but she could see the complexities hidden in the coil arrangements and the configuration of the magnets. The problem, Chen continued, is that we've only achieved 60% efficiency in our best tests. Something is draining energy, but we can't pinpoint exactly where or why. Maya knelt beside the motor, not touching it yet, but observing the connections. Can I see the test data? Chen gestured to a nearby workstation where multiple spreadsheets were open. Maya spent the next 20 minutes absorbing performance graphs, efficiency tables, and magnetic field measurements. Gradually, a pattern began to emerge. You're measuring efficiency during steady-state operation, Maya said finally, but what about during transitions? Startup, shutdown, speed changes. Chen furrowed his brow. Those are secondary considerations. The focus has been on peak performance. But look here, Maya pointed to a series of energy spikes in the data. These energy spikes exactly correspond with transition moments. The motor isn't losing energy during normal operation, it's wasting massive amounts of energy every time it switches states. Chen leaned over her shoulder to get a better look at the screen. I don't understand. Why would this be a problem? The transitions are brief. Maya turned to face him, her mind working quickly. Because in the real world, nothing operates at a constant steady state. Cars accelerate and decelerate, drones change direction, tools turn on and off. If the motor is wasting 40% of its energy just in transitions, then in practical applications, you'll never get anywhere near the theoretical efficiency. For a long moment, Chen was silent, processing her words. Then, slowly, a smile began to form on his face. My God, he murmured. That's why our field tests have been so disappointing compared to our lab results. He looked at Maya with something close to admiration. In 2 hours, you've identified something that's eluded us for 2 years. Maya felt a wave of validation, but kept it in check. Identifying the problem is just the first step. Fixing it is a whole other matter. Do you have any ideas? Maya bit her lip, hesitating. The solution forming in her mind was radical and would require significantly rebuilding the motor's control system. I need to tinker with the physical motor. And if I'm wrong? If you're wrong, we'll build another one, Chen said without hesitation. But if you're right. He paused, his gaze intensifying. If you're right, this could revolutionize the entire industry. Maya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. I need access to the precision tools and some parts from the warehouse.
Done.
What else?
Time.
This could take several hours. Chen checked his watch. It's 2 in the afternoon. I have a family meeting at 6, but I can reschedule. No, Maya said quickly. Don't reschedule your family meeting, because of me. I can work alone if you trust me. Chen studied her for a long moment. Miss Rodriguez. Maya, in 20 years of building this company, I've learned to recognize genuine talent when I see it. You have something that can't be taught at any university. He paused, then added more softly, but more importantly, you have integrity. I can see that in the way you treat your mother, in the way you talk about your work. Maya felt a lump form in her throat. How do you know about my mother? Maya, I know the name of every employee in this company, including our cleaning staff. Isabel Rodriguez has worked here for 5 years, never missed a day, always arrives early, and stays late. Do you think I wouldn't notice when she started bringing help? Chen smiled. And when that help turned out to be a U of T grad with first-class honors, well, that piqued my curiosity. Maya was speechless for a moment. You knew who I was from the start? I suspected. But until last night, it was just a suspicion. Chun made his way to the door, then stopped. Maya, regardless of what happens with this motor today, I want you to know something. Talent like yours shouldn't be cleaning offices at night. That's a waste this industry can't afford. After Chun left, Maya was left alone with the motor and her own ambitions. The next few hours would determine not only the success of this project, but the course of her entire life. She pulled up a chair, opened her bag to reveal a small toolkit she had brought, and began the most important work of her life. As she worked, Maya couldn't help but think about Chen's words. For the first time in months, someone had looked beyond her humble origins and recognized her true potential. But with that recognition came tremendous pressure. If she failed today, it wouldn't just be her own credibility at stake, but also the trust Chen had shown in her. Hours passed as Maya carefully dismantled sections of the motor, redesigning the feedback sensor setup and reprogramming the control algorithms. Her formal education had given her the theoretical foundation, but it was the years of making broken equipment work with creativity and determination that now guided her hands. When the sun began to set through the lab windows, Maya finally straightened up, her back aching from intense concentration. The motor was reassembled, but now with a fundamentally different control system that, in theory, should eliminate energy losses during transitions. But theory and reality didn't always align, and Maya was about to find out which side luck would fall on. The laboratory lights cast a cold glow over the modified motor as Maya completed the final checks of the system. Her hands trembled slightly, not from nervousness, but from exhaustion and adrenaline. For the past 4 hours, she had dismantled and rebuilt the heart of the Aurora project, guided by intuitions that defied 2 decades of conventional thinking about electric motor design. The sound of the elevator doors echoed down the hallway, followed by familiar footsteps. David Chen appeared at the lab door precisely at 6 o'clock, still wearing the casual clothes from before, but with a tension on his face that betrayed his anxiety. "How's it going?" he asked without preamble. Maya turned from the workstation where she was making the final adjustments to the control software. "I finished the physical modification an hour ago. Now I'm calibrating the control parameters." She hesitated, then added, "David, you need to understand. What I've done is fundamentally different from anything your team has tried before. If I'm wrong, it's not just a matter of reduced efficiency. The motor might not work at all." Chun crossed his arms, but his gaze remained encouraging. "Explain the approach." Maya took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. "The central problem was that you were treating state transitions as discrete events, using conventional control systems that respond to changes after they begin. But what if, instead, we anticipated the transitions?" Chun furrowed his brow. "How would you anticipate a speed change before it happens?" "Through continuous predictive analysis of load conditions and demand patterns." Maya moved toward the motor and pointed to a series of sensors she had added. These new sensors not only measure the motor's current state, but also detect the micro changes that precede larger transitions. The control system now uses this data to pre-configure the magnetic field, essentially preparing the motor for changes before they are required. Chun was silent, processing the implications. That would be like teaching the motor to predict the future. In a limited sense, yes. But more importantly, it eliminates the lag time that causes energy losses. Maya gestured to the graphs on her screen. In theory, this should result in nearly instantaneous transitions with minimal energy loss. And in practice? Maya smiled nervously. "That's the $2 million question, isn't it?" Chun approached the control console, his fingers hovering over the power switch. "Let's find out." But before he could flip it, the laboratory doors opened again, and 3 figures entered. Maya immediately recognized one of them, Dr. James Mitchell, the chief engineer at Chen Technologies, whose face was red with indignation. Accompanying him were 2 other men in expensive suits whom Maya didn't recognize. "David, what the hell is going on here?" Mitchell demanded, his voice echoing in the lab. "Security called me saying someone was tampering with the Aurora project without authorization." Chun straightened up, his posture becoming formal. James, let me introduce you to Maya Rodriguez. She identified a fundamental issue in our design that's eluded us for 2 years. Mitchell looked at Maya with barely concealed disdain. Her? David, this is the cleaning lady's daughter. She doesn't even have clearance to be here, let alone tamper with our most confidential project. Maya felt her blood rise to her face, but she kept her voice steady. Dr. Mitchell, I'm a mechanical engineering graduate with a specialization in energy systems. I identified. I don't care where you graduated from, Mitchell interrupted rudely. This lab is restricted to authorized personnel with years of experience in advanced motor development. What you've done here could have compromised 2 years of work. One of the suited men stepped forward. Maya noticed the company's security badge. Mr. Chen, we'll need the young lady to leave the premises immediately. Any breach of security protocol must be reported. David Chen raised a hand, his authority filling the space. Gentlemen, Maya is here at my invitation and under my direct authorization. Any modification made to the motor was personally approved by me. David, the third man, spoke for the first time, and Maya recognized the voice from the phone she'd heard a few times. Robert Chen, David's younger brother and vice president of operations. Father would be horrified to know you allowed someone without experience to tamper with our most important project. This goes against all the protocols we've set. Maya saw something flash across David's face, a shadow of pain quickly masked. Robert, my father built this company on the principle that talent can come from anywhere. He never would have rejected someone based solely on their background. Father also never would have risked compromising millions of dollars in research for sentimentalism, Robert replied coldly. The tension in the lab was palpable. Maya realized she had stumbled into a complex family dynamic, and her presence there represented more than just a technical test. It was a symbol of differing philosophies about how the company should be run. Gentlemen, Maya said, her voice cutting through the tension, there's a simple way to resolve this. If my modifications have improved the motor's performance, then the discussion about protocols is irrelevant. If they've worsened the performance, I'll take full responsibility and leave. Mitchell laughed dismissively. You really believe you can outdo 2 years of teamwork in one afternoon? Maya looked directly at him. Dr. Mitchell, I believe fresh perspectives sometimes see solutions that are hidden in plain sight. But I don't believe in empty words. I believe in results. David Chen watched the exchange with growing interest. James, what would you say to a quick test? 15 minutes to check the basic performance. It's a waste of time, Mitchell muttered, but then his expression turned calculating. Actually, you know what? Let's do it. When this test confirms that the motor is now inoperative or functioning below standard, I want it officially documented that unauthorized modifications by unqualified personnel resulted in a significant setback to the project. Maya felt a chill of determination. And if the motor performs better than before? Mitchell smiled condescendingly. If, and that's a big if, your modifications result in measurable improvement, I'll personally recommend that you be considered for a junior engineering position at the company. Robert Chen stepped forward. James, you don't have the authority to make that promise. Actually, David Chen intervened gently, he does. And I fully support that proposal. He looked at Maya. Are you comfortable with these terms? Maya nodded, feeling the weight of all the eyes on her. Completely. David Chen moved to the control console, his hand hovering over the power switch. Then, let's see what you've created. The motor came to life with a whisper, almost inaudible, so different from the noise Maya had expected that for a moment she thought something was wrong. But the displays began to show data, and slowly a smile began to form on her face. The numbers on the screen were better than she had dared to hope. Not only had the transition losses been virtually eliminated, but the overall efficiency was climbing from 85%, then 90%, then... This can't be right, Mitchell murmured, checking the sensors. It has to be a calibration error. But David Chen was smiling, a genuine smile of admiration and something deeper. Maya, you didn't just solve our problem. You created something revolutionary. The motor was operating at 94% efficiency, a number that should have been impossible with current technology. But more importantly, the transition tests showed energy losses so low they were nearly imperceptible. "Robert," David said to his brother, "call the press. We'll need to schedule a press conference for next week." But as the celebration began around her, Maya noticed something in the data that made her pause. There were patterns in the numbers, subtle anomalies that suggested the motor was doing something none of them had predicted. Something that might be even more significant than the improved efficiency. And when she looked up, she noticed that David Chun was watching her with an expression that was part pride, part curiosity, and part something she couldn't fully identify. As if he knew this was just the first of many revelations to come. The days following Maya's discovery were a whirlwind of activity at TYCOON Technologies. The laboratory on the 38th floor transformed into an improvised command center, with engineers coming and going constantly, testing and retesting Maya's modifications to confirm the impossible results. Technology journalists began calling, and rumors of a revolution in energy started circulating within Toronto's tech community. Maya found herself in a strange position, officially hired as a junior engineer, but treated with a deference usually reserved for senior team members. Her workstation had been set up next to the Aurora motor, and she spent her days refining the predictive control system and analyzing performance data that continued to defy explanation. It was on Thursday morning, a week after her initial discovery, that Maya made the observation that would change everything. She was studying telemetry data when she noticed something odd in the magnetic field patterns. The motor wasn't just operating with extraordinary efficiency, it was generating a secondary magnetic field, weak but distinctive, that shouldn't exist according to all known laws of electric motor physics. "David," she called across the lab, where he was discussing press conference preparations with his PR team. "Could you come see this?" David approached, followed by Dr. Mitchell, who had reluctantly accepted his new role as second in command of the Aurora project since Maya's success. "What did you find?" David asked, leaning over the workstation. Maya pointed to a series of sinusoidal waves on the screen. "These are the magnetic field data from the past 3 days. Do you see these smaller fluctuations here?" She zoomed in on a specific section. "They shouldn't exist. The motor is generating a magnetic field that has no relation to its primary function." Mitchell frowned. "That's impossible. It must be interference from other equipment in the building." "That was my first thought too," Maya said. "So, I ran the motor at different times, isolated it from other power sources, even tested it at midnight when the building was almost empty. The pattern remains consistent." David studied the data with growing interest. What would the frequency of this secondary field be? Maya checked her calculations. Approximately 0.3 terahertz, modulated in intervals of 1.7 seconds. David froze completely, his face visibly paling. Mitchell noticed the reaction. "David? What's going on?" For a long moment, David didn't answer. Then, slowly, he said, "Maya, I need you to shut down the motor immediately and don't restart it without my express permission."
Why?
"Is there something dangerous in the data?" David turned to Mitchell. "James, I need you to evacuate the lab of all non-essential personnel."
Now.
"David, you're scaring me," Mitchell said. "What's happening?" Instead of answering, David went to his phone and dialed a number he apparently knew by heart. "Professor Zhang? It's David Chun. I need you to come to the lab immediately." "Yes, I know it's urgent. It's about my father." Maya felt a chill of premonition. "David, what does this have to do with your father?" David hung up the phone and turned to her, his expression mixing determination with something that seemed like old pain. "Maya, what you've discovered, this specific magnetic field pattern, it's identical to something my father was researching 20 years ago, just before his death." The lab fell silent except for the soft hum of equipment. Maya felt like she had stumbled upon something much larger than just an engineering project. "Your father worked on electric motors?" "Among other things." David sat heavily in a nearby chair. "Maya, my father wasn't just a businessman. He was a brilliant physicist who spent the last years of his life working on a theory that the scientific community considered controversial." Mitchell approached, his expression serious. "David, you never mentioned your father's scientific research." Because I promised my mother I would never speak about it publicly.
But now.
David looked at the data on Maya's screen. Now I don't have a choice. The doors of the lab opened, and an elderly man with white hair entered, wearing a rain-soaked overcoat from the rain outside. Even in his 70s, he moved with the energy of someone much younger. David, he said in English with a strong Chinese accent, you said it was about your father. What have you discovered? David gestured to Maya. Professor Zhang, this is Maya Rodriguez, the engineer who made the modifications to the Aurora motor. Maya, this is Professor Zhang Wei from the University of Toronto, an expert in applied quantum physics, and my father's former research partner. Professor Zhang approached Maya's workstation, his trained eyes immediately focusing on the magnetic field data. For several minutes, he studied the numbers in silence, occasionally murmuring to himself in Chinese. Finally, he turned to David, his expression grave. David, these readings are identical to those your father and I documented in 1998. How is this possible? Maya looked between the two men, feeling like she was watching a conversation in code. Could someone explain what happened in 1998? Professor Zhang and David exchanged looks, then Zhang nodded slowly. Miss Rodriguez, in 1998, my colleague Henry Chen, David's father, and I were working on a theory about quantumly entangled magnetic fields. The idea was that under very specific conditions, an electric motor could generate magnetic fields that exist in a quantum superposition. Maya felt her mind racing. Quantum superposition? But that's particle physics. How would that apply to macroscopic motors? That was exactly the question we were trying to answer, Zhang continued. Henry had developed prototypes that consistently produced these anomalous fields, but we never fully understood the mechanism. David intervened. Their work attracted attention from several groups, including some government organizations interested in military applications. My father became worried about where the research could lead. And then, Zhang and David exchanged looks again. And then Henry died in a car accident, Zhang said softly. All his research records disappeared from the lab the following night. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Disappeared? Or were they stolen? We never knew for sure, David said. But my mother was so traumatized by the loss that she made me promise never to explore my father's research. She was convinced that his obsession with quantum physics had led to his death. Maya looked at the data on her screen with new understanding. And now, I've inadvertently recreated his work. Not just recreated, Professor Zhang said, studying the numbers more closely. You've gone beyond him. The patterns your motor is generating are more stable and consistent than anything Henry was able to achieve. Maya felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders. David, what does this mean for the Aurora project? For the company? David remained silent for a long moment, looking through the lab windows at the city below. It means that you've discovered something that could change the world, Maya. But it also means that maybe you've discovered something that some people would prefer to stay buried. Professor Zhang approached Maya, his expression serious but kind. Miss Rodriguez, I want you to understand something. What your motor is doing, generating stable quantum fields at a macroscopic scale, shouldn't be possible according to our current understanding of physics. If your findings are confirmed, they will not only revolutionize motor engineering, but potentially all of our understanding of quantum mechanics. Maya looked around the lab, which suddenly felt much smaller and more vulnerable than before. Professor, what exactly happened to David's father? Do you really believe it was just an accident? Zhang hesitated, then said calmly, Henry was planning to publish his results the week before his death. He had scheduled a presentation for the National Research Council. The day before his death, he called me, extremely agitated, saying that he had discovered something in the implications of his research that was making him question whether he should make it public. What kind of implications? David spoke for the first time in several minutes. Professor Zhang, and I have a theory about that. But if we're right, Maya, you haven't just discovered a new form of motor engineering. You may have discovered the key to a new form of energy that could make entire industries obsolete. Maya looked around the lab, suddenly understanding that her life had changed irrevocably. She had started the week as the cleaning lady's daughter trying to land her first engineering job. Now she was at the center of a discovery that could reshape the world, and that could also put her in danger. "So, what do we do now?" she asked. David smiled, but it was a determined smile rather than a happy one. "Now, Maya, we discover the whole truth. And this time, we won't let anyone stop us." The Chin Technologies lab had transformed into a fortress of secrecy during the next 2 weeks. David had implemented unprecedented security protocols, limiting access to only Maya, Professor Zhang, and a small trusted group of senior engineers. The press conference on the Aurora motor had been indefinitely postponed, and rumors about mysterious circumstances began to circulate within Toronto's tech industry. Maya found herself living a strange double life. Officially, she was still a junior engineer working on incremental improvements to the Aurora project. Unofficially, she was at the center of an investigation that was uncovering layers of conspiracy and corporate secrets dating back decades. The breakthrough came on a Friday night when Maya was alone in the lab, working on additional modifications to the motor. Professor Zhang had suggested that the quantum properties they were observing could be amplified under specific conditions, and Maya was trying to test that theory. She had adjusted the magnetic field configuration when something extraordinary happened. For a brief moment, not more than 3 seconds, the motor seemed to operate at 127% efficiency, a number that defied all known laws of thermodynamics. "This is impossible," she murmured to herself, checking and rechecking the data. But the numbers were there, documented by multiple independent sensors. Her phone rang, interrupting her concentration. It was David. "Maya, are you still in the lab? It's almost midnight. David, you need to see this. The motor just broke the laws of physics." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm on my way." David arrived 20 minutes later, accompanied by Professor Zhang, and to Maya's surprise, by her mother Isabel. Maya hadn't seen her mother since she'd started working full-time on the Aurora project, and guilt hit her instantly. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Isabel approached her daughter, a mixture of pride and concern in her eyes. "Mija, David told me what you discovered. About the project, about his father, about the risks." She paused, then added more softly, "He also told me about the people who might be interested in your discovery." Maya looked at David with alarm. "What people?" Professor Zhang answered. "Last week, my lab at the university was broken into twice. Nothing was stolen, but my research files on the work I did with David's father were accessed." And David added, "Our security team identified new surveillance equipment being installed in buildings across from this one. Someone is watching us." Maya felt a chill of fear mixed with anger. "So, what do we do? Do we give up the research?" "Absolutely not," David said firmly. "But we need to be smart about how we proceed." He gestured toward the motor. "Now, show me what you've discovered." Maya explained her latest modifications and replayed the data showing the impossible efficiency spike. Professor Zhang studied the numbers with growing excitement. "Maya, I think you accidentally achieved what Henry and I were theorizing but never managed to prove," he said. "You created a quantum resonance cascade that temporarily allowed the motor to extract energy from vacuum fluctuations." David looked between them. "In plain English?" Maya took a deep breath. "In plain English, for a brief moment, the motor extracted energy from empty space itself. This suggests that under the right conditions, we could create motors that generate more energy than they consume." The silence that followed was profound. Isabel was the first to speak. "Mija, does this mean?" "This means," Professor Zhang said quietly, "that Maya discovered something that could end the scarcity of energy for all of humanity. But it also means that she discovered something that could destabilize entire industries and put a lot of powerful people out of business." David walked over to the window, looking out at the city of Toronto glittering in the darkness. "My father always believed that technology should serve humanity, not just profit. But he also learned that good intentions don't protect you from people who see change as a threat." Maya joined him at the window. "David, what really happened to your father?" David was quiet for a long moment. "I've spent 20 years trying to find out." But recent events have given me some new leads. He turned to face the group. There was a company, Allied Energy Systems, that approached my father about licensing his research. When he refused, they offered to buy out our entire company. When he refused that too, they killed him, Maya finished quietly. I can't prove that. But Allied Energy Systems still exists, and they're now a major contractor for several government agencies interested in energy technology. David paused. And according to my sources, they've been very interested in our work on the Aurora project. Professor Zhang stepped forward. Which is why we need to act quickly. Maya, your discovery is too important to be buried or weaponized by people who see only its commercial or military value. Maya looked around at the faces of the people who had become her extended family over the past few weeks. What do you suggest? David smiled, and for the first time in days, it was a genuinely happy smile. I suggest we give your mother a much better job. We make your discovery public in a way that can't be suppressed, and we make sure the benefits of your work reach people who need them most.
How?
First, David said, walking over to a whiteboard and beginning to draw diagrams, we document everything in multiple secure locations. Professor Zhang will work with the international physics community to verify and publish your results. Second, Professor Zhang added, we file patents simultaneously in multiple countries, making this technology available through open-source licensing. Isabel, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. And third, Maya smiled, suddenly understanding what needed to happen. Third, we start a new company. One that builds energy solutions for communities that need them most. Remote areas, developing regions, places where traditional energy infrastructure is impractical. David nodded approvingly. Maya Rodriguez, you thought exactly like my father would have. Over the next few hours, they outlined a plan that was ambitious, risky, and absolutely necessary. By dawn, they had drafted business plans, contacted sympathetic journalists, and begun the process of creating a new type of company, one that would use Maya's discovery not just to generate profits, but to generate hope. As the first light of morning streamed through the laboratory windows, Maya stood next to a motor that had started as a simple engineering challenge and had become a catalyst for change that none of them could have imagined. Her mother stood beside her, no longer a cleaning lady, but Maya's new business partner and co-founder of what would become TYCOON Technologies. Mija, Isabel said softly, your father would be so proud. Maya had never spoken much about her father, who had died when she was young. But suddenly, she understood that his legacy lived on in her determination to use her gifts in the service of others. David approached them, carrying a tablet with fresh news reports. Maya, you should see this. Professor Zhang's preliminary findings were just published in the Journal of Applied Physics. And Allied Energy Systems just announced they're suspending all motor research programs. Maya read through the reports, a smile growing on her face. They're scared. They should be, Professor Zhang said, joining them. Because what you've discovered, Maya, isn't just a better motor. It's a new way of thinking about energy, about physics, about what's possible when we refuse to accept limitations. As they watched, the city of Toronto began to wake up outside their windows. In a few months, Maya knew, their discovery would begin to change how people thought about energy and technology. In a few years, it might change how people lived their daily lives. But more importantly, she had learned something about herself that was even more valuable than any scientific discovery. She had learned that her background, growing up in a family that had to struggle, working alongside her mother cleaning offices, seeing how hard ordinary people worked just to get by, hadn't been obstacles to overcome. They had been preparing her to understand exactly who should benefit from technology that could change the world. So, David said, looking around at their small group, ready to change everything? Maya looked at her mother, at Professor Zhang, at David, all people who had believed in her when she didn't even believe in herself. Let's do this. And as the sun rose over Toronto, lighting up a city full of people going about their daily lives, Maya Rodriguez knew that everything was about to change. Not just for her, but for everyone who had ever believed that a better world was possible. An engineer who had started as the daughter of a cleaning lady was about to become a catalyst for a transformation that would ripple out from this laboratory to communities around the world. Because sometimes the most powerful discoveries come not from people with the most resources, but from people with the deepest understanding of what the world really needs. And sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with force, but with a young woman who refuses to accept that things have to stay the way they've always been. The motor hummed quietly behind them, no longer just a machine, but a symbol of what becomes possible when talent meets opportunity, when compassion guides innovation, and when people dare to believe that they can change the world.